All right, thanks for coming back to another session here, live at the Swan Dome, Bitcoin 2021. We've got Alex Gladstein here. He's the Chief Strategy Officer at the Human Rights Foundation. Let's give a round of applause for Alex, all right? You know his work. I'll appreciate his work. Thank you. We've got Lyn Alden. She is at Lyn Alden Investments, also doing great work, so let's give her a round of applause. And at the end here, we have Mark Moss. He's a businessman, YouTuber, big Bitcoiner. All right. So let's just start with something simple. Like, how's it going? Like, what are your impressions from this weekend? It's been absolutely insane. I want to hear from you guys, what it feels like, the vibes you're getting, and have you been inspired by anything in particular?
For me, it's the sheer amount of energy. Like,
Yeah.
it's basically the venue's so, like, even though the venue's pretty big, you actually can't fit everyone in, like, any single thing. Like, this room's packed, the main hall's packed, almost any place you go is just totally packed.
Yeah.
So, and I've heard that the one from 2 years ago was like a sixth of the size.
Yeah, it was maybe a sixth the size. Lyn, can you put your mic down just a little bit? Just want to make sure everyone can hear you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
And you just got to get close. Yeah, the energy is crazy. Alex, anything, general impressions, then anything in particular?
Yeah, I saw this graffiti the other day. It said, "Vibes don't lie." And I thought that was pretty fitting.
Yeah.
The energy's off the charts. There's amazing people here, strong signal. Still some noise, but, you know, I think that the signal is like just incredible. You know, what a special time and a place in history to be able to come together.
Absolutely. Mark.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we can add on top of that, the energy is insane. As an online educator, I've just been super encouraged to see how many people are taking the time to actually build into their own education. So that's super encouraging. And to see everybody that's made the trek here sharing values and continuing to try to build on their education and educate and add into the space, man, the future's bright. I mean, everybody's here for sound money, and that's a big movement. And I'm really encouraged to see that.
Absolutely. Alex, we're getting a lot of FUD, and I think we're seeing in like increasing amounts of politicization. I have a hard time with that word. Bitcoin being politicized. And I think, you know, the energy FUD is a driver of that. And I love your message and the question that you asked Jack Dorsey yesterday about Bitcoin being sort of American money, like money that has innate American values. And I was wondering if you think that that is a narrative that we need to start pushing, maybe to combat this, you know, the politics that are really coming into Bitcoin, especially in this country.
Yeah, well, look, Bitcoin doesn't need our help. I mean, Bitcoin will complete its mission, I think, just fine. But people need our help, right? So people will be like gaslit by media and politicians, and they will be deterred from using Bitcoin. They have been over the last 10 years. I was just talking with a group of Lebanese people who were lamenting the fact that, like, they basically were like, you know, discouraged from using the asset, and it could have really helped them and their families over the last 2-3 years. And that's just like one example out of many globally. So while I don't think Bitcoin needs our help, people need our help. And I do think we should combat the FUD. That's why I try to do it. It's for the people, not for the Bitcoin network.
Right.
But in general, yeah, the FUD will rotate. I mean, look, it was like for a while there, it was Tether. Tether was like the big thing. And then we kind of rotated over to the environment. Then we went to ransomware. We're going to go back to terrorists and criminals probably next. It's just on a constant rotation. So we kind of have to hit all the FUD all the time. But I do think the environment one's going to be the big one for the next couple of years. And that's why it's important to help, you know, people understand the nuance of the fact that, like, as people, humans, energy use is good. Like, as civilization, we're going to use more energy the more advanced we are. Like, do you want to be walking 5 miles to get your water, or do you want to have water system?
Right.
Do you want to be washing your clothing, or do you want to have, like, sorry, a little bit of feedback.
Okay, I think we're good. I think that was the NSA trying to.
Alex was spitting fire. They had to shut him down.
I'll finish, but the point is, do you really want people to be spending like 8 hours of the day washing clothing, or do you want, you know, a clothing machine? Like, we will use more energy. That's number one. Number two, our existing money system uses an enormous amount of energy in a way that people don't understand. It's not just a Visa transaction. It's the banking system. There's the dollar system underneath. The U.S. government and its military are like the largest consumer of petroleum products. Like, we have to hit that narrative. And then thirdly, you have to understand the way that Bitcoin mining is going to revolutionize the global energy and electricity grid. There's countries out there that have 8, 9, 10% of the population with access to electricity, and the other 90% don't have it. And Bitcoin mining will be like a subsidy or a bootstrap to help bring on the rest of the population into the grid. So these are very important things to discuss, and just people have to deal with facts. So again, we don't need to defend Bitcoin, but to get people to be able to participate in this revolution, we will have to fight the FUD.
Absolutely. Lyn, your thoughts on energy FUD? I know it's like your FUD busting article is great, and I think it's one of the pieces of FUD, right? The energy argument. Yeah, just want to hear your thoughts, maybe how they've developed and maybe crystallized, because I feel like we need to get these messages really distilled. It's one of those things where it's really easy to say Bitcoin's going to boil the oceans or some version of that, and very hard to debunk that and to prove that that's not the case. So what do you think are some messages like distilled down that we can use to fight that energy FUD?
So I plan on writing an article about that in a few months.
Okay.
And so I did touch on it in that general FUD article, but I want to actually give it a full article. And the reason is because it currently is one of the biggest FUDs out there. It's one of the biggest concerns. And from what I've seen, it's people don't understand the scaling. That's actually some of the biggest things they don't get.
Yeah.
And so sometimes what I do on Twitter, I use that as a tool to gauge sentiment or gauge what people are, what their questions are, where I put out a chart and I get feedback. And so for example, I put out a chart about Bitcoin's energy usage, just kind of the stat that it uses like 0.1% of global energy, or
Right.
like 0.5% of electricity. And people are like, oh, that's too much for something that doesn't do anything. Whereas, I mean, all his work shows, all Alex's work shows all the things it does.
Right.
But then if you actually, I also see they don't get how it scales. And one thing I highlighted maybe a week ago was an article from 2018 that said by 2020 Bitcoin used all the world's
Right.
energy, and it uses 0.1% of the
Was that in
world's.
Newsweek or was it
Yes.
Time? It was in Newsweek.
Can you believe that? It was in Newsweek magazine.
It's not retracted, right?
I don't think
Like,
no, it's still there. And
Such terrible math.
and so
Bad
like
math.
you can never estimate exactly how much energy to use, but you can know the rough idea based on the block subsidies, the way the market capitalization works. It's basically, even if Bitcoin's highly successful, it does the energy usage does not scale. And so I covered that a little bit in my transaction article where I had a chart of like security spend as a percentage of market cap. But I want to do the same thing for energy to show that it doesn't scale the way. And it's one thing I said before is that journalists they write about so many different topics, and in order to understand Bitcoin, it's like you have to understand the code enough and then also understand finance enough. And so a lot of them are diving into a subject that, when I first covered Bitcoin, I didn't get exactly how, like I saw the block subsidy, but I never actually sat down and did the math for energy consumption. But so they're writing it, their editor says, hey, we need this in a couple days, and just, and so I basically want to put a lot of effort into one really big energy piece that hopefully people can reference, and I basically do my part to just try to get facts out there.
That'll be huge. We can add it to Alex's and Nick's work on the subject.
And you also mentioned that, like, I think it's a good point that a lot of people don't often think about is, like, in the future, very few people are going to use the main chain. Like, for their average transaction, it's hopefully going to be on like a non-custodial service like Lightning, or it's going to be custodial, right? So the critics don't account for that, right?
Yeah, and probably a blend of both. We'll probably see all sorts of different scaling solutions. I mean, I like the work that Lightning Labs is doing with Lightning, for example, and all the stuff we're seeing there. But most people just don't get how that works. And that's partly because really that whole network is like 3 years old. And it's really, even in the first 3 years, and it's really getting increasingly usable.
Yeah.
And so that's just all the media attention is, only in the past few years has Bitcoin really had substantial media attention.
Yes.
And it's all on the price. And we're really not at the stage where, like, most journalists wouldn't know much about what the Lightning Network does, like what Lightning Labs does. And so I think, maybe hopefully in a couple of years that angle gets more and more covered.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you done your panel or your talk with Elizabeth yet?
Yeah, about 2 hours ago.
Excellent.
I want to add on to that something that Lyn said. Obviously talking about how it scales and how it doesn't use much energy, et cetera. But one thing she mentioned is that some people don't realize why it's needed and why that energy isn't a waste and it's actually good. And so I think, to Alex's point, it doesn't need to be defended. But I think if people had a better understanding of actually what it's fixing, the problems that it's solving, right? Fix the money, fix the world, et cetera. It's the most important thing. And so, YouTube uses more energy than Bitcoin mining does. And is YouTube needed, right? We can play the game all day, but when you understand the problems that it solves, and Alex does a great job in his work showing like the humanitarian things that it's solving, you understand how big of a problem it's solving and any amount of energy that's used in this is actually not a waste; it's necessary and it's important.
Well, there's also the issue of the virtue signaling versus actually like caring about the issue. So, for political reasons, the U.S. government is decommissioning enough nuclear power this year to almost run the entire Bitcoin network. Right? There's also enough methane coming out of landfills in the United States to power the Bitcoin network for like the next 3 decades. So, if we actually cared, if we actually cared about the issues underneath, like making the planet more green and sustainable, we would be like tackling those issues. We wouldn't be shutting down Diablo Canyon, etc. But like, I just feel like it's not, a lot of the criticism is not authentic. And sometimes we're not going to win because the agenda is not about sustainability. It's about the hatred of Bitcoin. So sometimes we're not going to win. I just think we need to know that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point.
And I think that's a point really we're stressing. There's a difference between green and greenwashing or green virtue signaling. And so, like, I do think it's really important to, like, if do things that basically improve the environment wherever possible, cleaner air, cleaner water, things like that. But that gets caught up, and people use that to push something that looks green.
Right.
We had this, anyone in the nutrition finds this with food all the time. Over the past decade, as healthy eating got more popular, you see like health washing, where like something looks healthy, but you actually look at the ingredients and it's like, like stressing that it's organic and like all this. You look at it and it's like soybean oil and like all this stuff and it's and it's kind of like that with the energy concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about Lightning, and Lyn is actually an engineer by training, and so I think is able to a lot more than most macro economists is able to understand the tech behind Bitcoin, which is really cool. And she's become interested in Lightning lately, and spoke with Elizabeth Stark. Sounds like some of you guys were around for that, which is really cool. I can't wait to watch it. Tell us about Lightning, what you've been learning, and why you think it's important to build.
Well, I think the scalability is critical, and ideally you want one that's as trustless as possible. So we already have custom scaling, right? Any exchange is basically custom scaling and things like that. But you actually want to send permissionless payments to someone, and so that's actually why the emerging market aspect, like basically people sending small remittances, people sending peer-to-peer transactions, the type of stuff that Alex does, that interests me way more than like Bitcoin sitting in my portfolio and doing its volatility thing and whatever it's going to do. Actually, like that work is, in my opinion, just far more interesting, really, when you get down to it. Yeah. And also, in the current kind of media FUD is that Bitcoin doesn't do anything, and it's like pretty much every time I'd be like, well, look literally at everything he's writing. Just,
right.
Stop saying what you're saying, read all of that, and then get back to me about whether or not Bitcoin is doing anything. And so, really, on the Lightning layer and on that kind of global stage is where we're seeing, some of the real use cases. Because a lot of us, journalists included, are from, say, developed markets, and we're like, why would anyone need? Like, we have payment systems, we have Visa. Right. Why do we need? And it's like, well, we can also use it domestically, but it's even more important in markets that have less developed or more restricted access to those things.
Absolutely, yeah. Alex, I mean, there's definitely a massive privacy case to make to have Lightning. Nick Szabo earlier today, or it was yesterday, said that look at Bitcoin like your savings account, and look at the dollar and fiat money like your spending money, like currency, right? Bitcoin is money, and we'll have fiat around as a currency and method of payment. That might be the case, but it doesn't mean that we don't need Lightning.
Yeah, I think I tried to stress this when I was speaking with Jack Dorsey, but there's significant advances being made in the last 2 years with usability of Lightning, and that's the big thing, right? So now you can take someone's like URL, like a Strike can set up a tip jar basically, and any organization can set up a tip jar anywhere in the world, and I can non-custodially teleport them a bearer asset instantly. And like the implications of this are just not understood by like the broader public. Like eventually it's going to be possible to put in your Twitter bio a passive privacy protecting Lightning, tip jar. And anybody can support the creator or the content creator they like in a way that's completely outside the banking system. Censorship existing in parallel to the establishment and in the way that these corporations can control us. And I've always thought Lightning was a very important tool to fight surveillance capitalism for people in America and Europe who aren't worried about like debasement, straight up, or thugs coming. But like we're worried about like serving up all of our data to these corporations that are starting to like know more about us than we know about ourselves. And I think that the fact that Lightning allows us to interact with this digital environment, without revealing all this stuff about us, it's basically like making a cash payment. Like, there's still vulnerabilities with Lightning, but a lot of them can be fixed with wallets, the wallet level. And I think in 2 to 3 years, basically, when you make a Lightning payment, it's going to basically be private. And that's why I was kind of, disappointed that Snowden doesn't understand this.
Yeah.
And he's out there pushing Zcash, and it's like he's calling Lightning shenanigans, and it's like, no, man, this is the signal.
Yeah.
Like, and I think everybody's eventually going to get that. The problem with the privacy industry right now is they don't understand the sound money piece. They don't get the 21 million piece. So they're like, I'll just go make my own coin and I can do like blind signatures or whatever.
Right.
They're eventually going to realize why that's a bad idea. They'll come back to Bitcoin and they'll take all the scientific knowledge they've gained on their projects. They'll bring it back to Bitcoin. So we'll get there.
Yeah, what I think what he just kind of said is that last piece is key, where all that stuff eventually comes back to Bitcoin. And so I believe that Lightning further proves that narrative. And we can tell that the way technology cycles adopt it or evolve, that they start with this kind of slow base layer and then they build tech on top of it. And so we're starting to see with Lightning and applications like Sphinx Chat, for example, are bringing more than just even fast, cheap, private payments, but now even, peer-to-peer chat, peer-to-peer messaging, even opening up video applications and things like that on top of the censorship-resistant immutable blockchain layer. And so I think it just shows that the historical narrative or that evolution of tech cycles. It's evolving super fast. All these other coins, to Alex's point, will come over. So this one's faster. Well, not faster than Lightning. Oh, this one's more private. Well, not faster, not more private than Lightning. So you're seeing all that, but then with chat and video and stuff coming over,
it's like that beautiful dream that Andreas Antonopoulos painted, in 2015, 2016. He's talking about streaming money. It's here. It's here. We have Sphinx. We're building it out. Like, I can listen to TFTC on my phone and stream them, hard money in a way that's like not tracked. It's freaking amazing.
It's really freaking amazing. It is, and it's just going to be something to watch. And this next 10 years, right? So what are we? 12 years. So Bitcoin, like 2032. Like, can't even imagine what's going to be happening. And this is like it's a protocol stack. And this is a debate that, like a point that I think most people don't get, or like most no coiners or altcoiners don't understand, is that this is a protocol war, and we've gone through protocol wars before, right? This is a protocol layer on top of the internet. TCP/IP beat OSI. OSI was actually a corporate protocol it took years to put together. They, teamed up with universities and corporations to put together this pristine, perfect, networking protocol, and it was great. But TCP/IP launched, and by a few people at the University of Minnesota, and it wasn't perfect, but it got built upon and became adopted, and that's it. The whole internet's built on TCP/IP. So this is what's happening with sound money, right? And we're doing it with Bitcoin right now. So yeah, I mean, Lyn, can you go for it?
That's 45-year-old technology,
right?
TCP/IP.
Yeah.
So people are saying like, we can't build something on old technology. Like Bitcoin's already 12 years old.
Yeah.
So it's like, and TCP/IP is nowhere near going away.
Right.
Probably 45 more years. We're looking back and say it's 90 years old.
Yeah.
And you build on top of it. I mean, the internet's obviously gotten way better, even though the underlying protocol hasn't changed since where it's based on the same thing as 1970.
Exactly.
Same thing with USB, for example. We keep upgrading USB. We have 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. It gets faster, but it's generally backward compatible, and it's just this ongoing, evolving standard.
Yeah, and the censorship resistance piece is so key because it's so interesting. Obviously, the whole thing that happened when I talked to Jack and we got interrupted by Laura Loomer, and she's been deplatformed, right? But I guess she doesn't understand that Bitcoin is for people who have been deplatformed, right? So we're in this weird historical moment where we have these centralized services that we still are all embedded in, but we are building out a decentralized censorship resistant platform. So people who are deplatformed in the future are going to run on Bitcoin Lightning, for example, right? So it's just funny that a lot of the deplatformed people don't really understand this.
Yep.
And that's global, right? Dissidents around the world by and large still don't really grasp it yet, and that's the work I try to do, is to try to open their eyes and show them if they want to use it. Again, Bitcoin's voluntary, no one can force you to use it. If they're interested, hey, it's there for them, and it can't be stopped. It's unstoppable. So, I think we're going to start to see, what Jack said, but like I don't know. I think kind of like Laura Loomer and like this is the noise. The signal is Jack Dorsey saying there's nothing that's more important for him to work on his entire lifetime.
Right.
This is like one of the most powerful people in the world.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I thought that was amazing.
I want to add on to what they were saying. We add both those things together, and so back to the censorship-resistant immutable layer. That's the hard money at the bottom, and then we can build more soft applications on top of that. But you can't go the other way around. And so, kind of to Lyn's point as well, like in order to get progress, we need more attempts, we need more tries, and so you need that very basic base layer that then you can add more complex things on. If you had a very complex base layer like some of these other chains have, it limits what you're able to build on top of it. And so the simpleness, or maybe simplicity of the Bitcoin network allows for almost limitless stuff to add on top of it.
Yeah, that's how protocols scale, and we'll continue to add layers on top of. I mean, and it's exactly the reason why this is 45-year-old technology. You can't go back. Everything's built on top of it already, and so it's going to come. Is it going to be Ethereum or is it going to be Bitcoin? That's kind of the competition that's come down to at this point. So what's going to be the rails, right? And Ethereum has chosen to try to scale on the base layer. I think that's a bad choice, and they're going to lose because of it.
What else they also did was recently that they picked up on the narrative attack on them, which was they had an unlimited monetary supply. So they decided that they're going to come out with a fixed monetary supply.
Yes.
But the very fact that somebody can get together and decide to change the monetary supply is a problem.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're trying to get away from.
Yeah, it's like it's really like it's not necessarily 21 million is a little arbitrary, but what it stands for is the idea that nobody can change the monetary supply. Like you all control the monetary supply with your full node, right? So that's not the case in any other alternative currencies, whether it be a CBDC or something like Ethereum or Binance Chain or whatever. It's a small group of people who get to control the rules. This is our one chance to do it differently, and it's open to everybody. And I just think that's very beautiful.
It's a beautiful thing, guys. Bitcoin is for everyone, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a revolution, is what we're experiencing right here.
Yeah.
On so many levels. So I'm curious your thoughts on how Bitcoin might affect the way we organize society, affect law and order, affect governments, affect politics. Alex, I'll start with you. How, like in a Bitcoin future, 10, 20, 30 years, like how does it affect our social order?
Yeah, I guess I'm most interested at the geopolitical level, like what's going to start happening, like when governments start realizing that this asset is something they should have on their balance sheets.
Yep.
And that maybe they want to even try to tax the pop. They want to try to incentivize, like they want to collect Bitcoin because they're like fiat currency is over time just getting weaker and weaker, and maybe they can't sell bonds as easily, right?
Yep.
So they're going to want Bitcoin. So how are they going to do that? Are they going to like, hey, pay your taxes with Bitcoin, we'll give you like 20% off? Like, I don't know, man. Like it's going to be interesting to see. And there's going to be competitions between countries. I was talking to a Pakistani Bitcoiner, and he's like, look, I've grown up with this whole war competition between India and my country, and they've been trying to like stack up like a bigger military force and do like a nuclear atomic competition. And he's like, I believe the future of our countries are actually going to be it'll be a Bitcoin stacking competition. I just thought that was really interesting and kind of funny.
Yeah, it is. Lyn, have you thought much about this topic, about how Bitcoin will affect the way we organize ourselves?
It's definitely one of those things that's hard to think out too far because it's hard to think in exponential terms. And so one thing I'm looking at is the fact that, before it affects some of these really developed markets, it's already going to affect some of the emerging markets. And so we're going to get signposts along the way to see how it affects them. And so we can watch, for example, El Salvador, Guatemala, Nigeria. We can see how some of that's happening. And then that gives us more tools to apply how to come back. One thing to keep in mind is that right now, even at, say, now it's still under $1 trillion, but $1 trillion asset, right? That's still very, very small in the global scheme of things. There's roughly 500 trillion in assets. If you look at Credit Suisse data, for example, it's 400 trillion net worth, some bigger percentage of assets on like 500 trillion or more. And so, for example, even if Bitcoin goes up 10x, it's still like an asset that's outside of the currency system. It's just like It's not really systemic. So basically, price has a lot more to go before it becomes truly like disabling the kind of current orders of things. But it really starts in some of those countries that are starting with more fragile circumstances where it makes a bigger impact at an earlier level.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would add on to that, to the question anyway of how this changes organization in the future. And so we're in this technological revolution. There's like a 50-year technology cycle. So we have this new technology, decentralized technology, but it fits in with this political, social, cultural revolution that we're having every 250 years. So 500 years ago was the Protestant Reformation, 250 years ago was the birth of the United States, French Revolution. And we're in another revolution today. And both of those are rejecting globalization, centralization, in favor of decentralization. So we're at that point. I think anybody could tell we're at kind of peak globalization today. And so the revolution then goes to decentralization. And at the same time, we have a new technology that helps that adopt. So I think in the future, we'll reject the globalization and things will be organized more bottom up. So we'll see probably the end of the big corporations, big organizations, big governments, and be organized on a smaller decentralized level, working up with the new technology we have.
Yeah, the other thing I think about a lot beyond like the geopolitical level, which will be determined by how basically central banks interact with Bitcoin mining, changes the ability of some countries to become energy independent and less reliant on like foreign powers. I think about like how it's going to change our lives, like, with regard to like the creator economy and the media we read and things like that. If we start really seeing this pick up over the next few years where people can actually start interacting with their audiences in this peer-to-peer way where they can just receive money and hold it and instantly send it, we're going to probably see a decline in the advertising industry because you won't necessarily need advertising so much anymore.
Yeah.
So it's going to change advertising. Again, it's going to change this idea of like governments and corporations kind of, when you use your Visa card, like I'll give an example. Like about a year and a half ago, I'll never forget this. I walked into a pet food store and I bought like my dog some like toothbrush-shaped dog treats. And I used my Visa Chase card, like I plugged it in. This was not an online purchase. And I walked out of the store and it got hit on like Twitter with an advertisement for like basically the same thing, a very similar product, like 10 minutes later. So like when I was like, how the hell did that happen? Like I didn't speak the word. It wasn't like picked up on my mic. Like it couldn't have been geolocation. How do they know I didn't just buy like like something for a bird or a cat or something? And I looked into it, and Chase actually lists, and they reveal that they basically like immediately share what you buy with like these data markets. It's like actually part of their business. So we're looking at a world where like when you buy something, it's going to be more like the cash economy, where like when you bought a newspaper at the newspaper stand, the person doesn't know your address or where you came from, what your last purchase was, or what you're going to buy next, and they can't model and shape you, right? So like we're going to maybe go back to that.
Yeah.
So that's really going to have like massive transformative effects, even on just like our daily lives.
Huge.
I had a similar moment like years ago when I got that privacy kind of example where like years ago, like I booked a dentist appointment and just like that's it. And I was happened to be looking at Google Maps like weeks later, and it's like Google's like, oh, you have a dentist appointment right here. I'm like, so you read my email? That's what we're doing.
Oh, they definitely read your email.
And it was so long. That was like long ago before it was like super common. Now I was like, really, is that blatant? And you're not even hiding it. So like, so I was like, okay, I won't like say anything important in email, I guess. So
Convenience is obviously far more important to 99% of us than privacy.
One thing I would add to kind of what Alex was saying about changing the way that we spend and consume is that we have this fiat money system that forces us or encourages to consume 0% interest rates, get free credit cards, and so consume. And then at the same time, now we have this ESG narrative that's emerging, which is now we have to save the environment. So we have one narrative that's pushing us to consume as much as we can, but then, but let's put all these regulations to slow that consumption down. It's kind of this oxymoron. But when we move to a savings technology like Bitcoin, it starts to change your perspective, and it turns people to more of a saver. And so you're still going to buy the things. I'm still going to want entertainment, travel, etc. But it changes. You're not buying a bunch of crap that you don't need. Encourages, or gets rid of malinvestment, things like that. So I think it will definitely change that consumption economy as well.
Yep, absolutely. We're at about time, and I know all of you are very busy, so we're going to wrap it up. Mark, you've been working on some cool stuff. I thought maybe I'd give you a minute to talk about what you've been working on.
Sure. In a minute. Well,
yeah, 1 minute.
I'm partnered up with what's going on in Bitcoin Beat, and which is trying to build economies, decentralized economies around the world. And we have a way that we're really going to add some fire onto that. Start shipping jobs. Start shipping phones. We're going to switch. Half the world is off the banking system. We'll switch them directly into the Bitcoin economy. Empower them with jobs, money, which then empowers them to help other people, which is this like upwards flywheel that builds economies. We can start layering on things, other technologies, water, power, solar, and even micro loans that can really build these decentralized economies. I think it can be done really quick. I think the world's going to change in a couple of years, and Lightning Bitcoin's going to drive that.
Yeah, I'm building on the Bitcoin Beach model. So Mark's really jumped on this, and he's got contacts to make it happen. So I think the first big batch of phones is going out, right?
Yeah, next month we're going to start shipping. The goal is 100,000 phones within the next 18 months. 100,000 lives will change. It only takes about 15% of a population to create a revolution. So if we can ship a couple million of these in the next couple of years, that affects their friends, family, their community. We have 20, 30, 40 million people pretty quickly. And that can put pressure back onto the rest of the world. And we can layer on education on top of that. So right now everyone's learning Marxism here in the United States. We can teach free markets. We can teach entrepreneurship. We can teach real health. We can teach them why they should be eating beef instead of processed bugs over here. So we can do a lot of things. I'm not cool with the World Economic Forum's agenda 2030 on nothing. I'm not happy with that. I don't want to eat bugs, and I want to do everything I can for the rest of my life to make sure that does not happen.
All right. Mark, I'm super excited about what you're working on, man. I think it's a good cause, and excited to help out however I can. Lyn, Alex, any last words or sign-offs, anything you want to share before we go?
I would say check out VJ's book.
Yes.
Yeah, VJ.
VJ. Shout out VJ. Congratulations on the book, buddy.
Awesome. Just grateful for all of your attention. Thanks for having me on. Just would ask people to consider to think about how Bitcoin grows at its base layer, these devs who kind of slave over it. Consider meeting them, talking to them, learning about what they need, and strategizing with them about how we can improve what they're doing. And there's a lot of organizations that you can work with, like Brink or some of the corporations. We're trying to do some stuff, but we need a lot more. We want, like, in 2 years, we want there to be 40 organizations that are supporting the Bitcoin development ecosystem. So there's now's the time to get involved in that. Yeah. I believe that in the future, in 5 to 10 years, every single university worth its salt will have a full-scale Bitcoin research and development arm.
Beautiful.
It's inevitable, but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
And now's the time where you can make a difference. So
that
goes for all of you. So
yeah.
something to think about.
So where can we donate to the HRF?
Donate to hrf.org/BTC. You can also, I would check out Brink. I love what they're doing with John Newberry, and that's more. You can think about what we're doing is more of bridge funding, and Brink's kind of Brink's like the Harvard of Bitcoin. It's like you get to do this really intense fellowship, right?
Cool.
We're just trying to provide little bridge funding to make it possible for people to keep working on what they want to work on, and this is going to diversify and grow and evolve and mature into a really complex kind of system. And support network. So, check us out, and we'll see you all at the conference. Thank you.
These three are doing amazing work. Let's give them one more round of applause. Thank you all.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.